John, what did you take from this cold slap in the face that Democrats got last night?
They did not run an effective campaign, nor did Kamala Harris. Now, understand, if a few thousand votes, one way or the other, had gone differently, we would be saying exactly the opposite. And so it's a relative term. But my sense of this is that the American people spoke loudly and clearly, not only the electoral vote, but the popular vote and the shift in the Senate, which means that we will now, for the next 2 years, excluding the House, because we don't know what's going to happen with the House, we will have the Republicans in complete control of government. That, by the way, has a profound effect, as I tried to point out last night, on our judiciary, because now it means that the White House and the Justice Department, whoever is Attorney General of the United States, will suggest candidates, and they will have almost a rubber stamp in the Senate. So all of these things are significant. I do want to indicate that I was as surprised as everyone else. I did not believe that the American people would embrace Donald Trump, and they did. And that's the simple reality. There's no way to get around it.
Peter's saying it was about the economy, Mark. The people could not afford food, rent, energy, fun times. Prices were high, and they blamed Biden. And this is what I was speaking about before. Thank you, Peter, which is that Kamala Harris was tasked with a difficult challenge, and that was to establish who she was in a very short time as she was dropped into the race, and yet also individuate, separate from a president who's just not very popular. I mean, Joe Biden just had really pretty abysmal numbers. That was a tough thing to do, John.
Absolutely. And no vice president can really separate from a president. That's why, in this case, another vice president went down to defeat. Remember, the only vice president since the 19th century who has succeeded to win the presidency was George H.W. Bush, and he was embraced by a popular president, Ronald Reagan. So traditionally, if you're vice president, you run from a disadvantage. But there's no excuses to be made, Mark. Look, the Democratic Party has to rebuild. Think about the demographics, which I know you're going to talk about. They lost a lot of traction with African American voters, particularly men. Hispanic voters. I was stunned by the Hispanic numbers. And I'm told among Jews that, again, there was a real blow to the Democrats. And part of the problem is that Kamala Harris was not, I don't want to say she wasn't a good candidate. She wasn't an able candidate. And I think that is a serious problem, too. Would it have been better if Joe Biden had withdrawn and allowed an open Democratic primary? Perhaps. But we now know that Kamala Harris's leadership at the Democratic Party is over. There will now be a struggle for power within the Democratic Party for a new leadership. There's also a good question for you, and that is the National Committee, which is staffed with Biden and Harris people. What kind of shifts will take place in the National Committee? The Democrats.
That's a great. Didn't mean to interrupt, but it reminds me, John, just your comment reminds me of what happened after Reagan. Remember how they got was it called the Democratic National Committee? I think they called it, and they reconstituted the essentially reconstituted the Democratic strategy, and that gave rise to who? Bill Clinton. It was a successful reconstitution of the party.
Can I tell you, the interesting thing for me is I was prepared to give a lecture later this week on how the Republican Party would have to restructure itself. I had to tear the whole thing up. And now I have to concentrate on what the Democrats will do. So this is another factor in American politics. But for Donald Trump, it is complete vindication. It is a stunning victory in every way. And he will now reap the benefit of having won this kind of stunning victory, which nobody anticipated. We are told now even the people around Trump expected that he would lose the election.
Well, he's won 2 elections now that he expected to lose, 2016 and this one. Harris appears to have won 80% of the black vote, according to exit polling. Now, That's a lot. You'd say, well, that's most everybody, right? But that's a drop of 10 percentage
10%.
points
10%.
compared with
You need
2020
90%.
when Joe Biden won 9 of 10 black votes. So Trump, okay, so you hear, well, okay, well, where did Trump pick them up? The answer is yes. Trump, who won 20% of the black vote this time, according to exit polling, had won 13% of the black vote in 2020. That's an 8%, 8% in 2016. So, and by the way, the 8% in 2016 was more than any Republican had gotten in terms of support from the black vote since George Bush in 2000. So look at the way Trump built on that from 8% to 13% and then 20%. And as you correctly pointed out, John Rothman, just a few thousand votes are enough to tip it one way or another. That's why the game is played around the edges.
That's right, 100%. The other thing that interested me, if I may quickly, is women. I really thought there would be a wave of women on the question of reproductive rights. That wave did not materialize. And in fact, if you look in Florida at Measure B, which had to do with the right of a woman to control her own body, they got a majority, but they needed 2/3. They needed 60%, and they didn't get even 60% in Florida. That, by the way, was a huge victory for DeSantis, who not only won on that one, but also on the decriminalization of pot.
Yeah, it's interesting that these abortion measures that showed up in different states had different outcomes, right? So Missouri is a really ruby red state, right, John? And they had the toughest, I want to say, abortion law on in the country, and voters repudiated it, right? So now abortion
and
rights.
Yet the Democrats were not able to capitalize on that. And you may remember in 2004 that the reason John Kerry lost Ohio was because an initiative on gay rights that was on the ballot on gay marriage. And so the Democrats simply blew it. They didn't have the infrastructure. They didn't have the ability. But Mark, do you understand? We couldn't anticipate that. And in fact, the election was in many ways very close. So if it had flipped, Kamala Harris would be called a genius. Now she's a villain. Let me ask you a question.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah. No, go ahead with your.
I was going to say, Albert, play for Brother Rothman the panel on what went wrong. What was the first video we were going to run for John? I just would love everybody to see this, and then we'll get John on the other side to give us his thoughts. I think the questions as to what went wrong have a lot of answers because probably a lot of things went wrong. And as we say, it was just a little wobble here and there that determined this election. Go ahead, Albert, please.
Ashley Allison is joining us, as well as Scott Jennings. I want to hear from both of you. Ashley, obviously this is not the outcome you had hoped for. What do you think? What are you looking at about what went wrong?
Well, I think she wasn't able to put the coalition together she needed to in each of the states. It was never going to look the same. But we've always talked about this would be on the margin. So if you pull off even 1% of one of your base constituencies, which he was able to do he was able to do in many of them, you were not going to be able to keep that state or hold that state. And so I've heard a lot of people talk about the conversations we need to have. And I think we do need to have conversations as a party. But the conversation that I want to have are for people who showed up and voted for Kamala Harris and tell them to hold their head up high. I remember in 2016 having to walk back into the White House today, and I was embarrassed to go to work because I feel like I had failed our country. Despair is not the time to lose hope. It is the time to dig down, to do some soul searching and fight for a better day. Many of the communities that are most vulnerable and that are really afraid right now, the trans community, immigrants, people of color, even if there's polling or outcomes that are showing that some people of color voted for Donald Trump, you're worthy, you're visible, you're not alone. And so you can feel what you feel right now, but we have to do work to protect the most vulnerable. And we can, and we will. And then for the people who did support Donald Trump, we've sat on this network and people have said the things that he said about retribution and about going after his enemies. That's not what he really meant. So in moments when he does that, it's your responsibility to hold him accountable and not let him do that, and not let him undermine the democracy.
I like
Because
that. I like what she says related to people who do have so much at stake in this election, women, communities that are discriminated against. But I think you need to put some meat on the bones when it comes to this resistance, and we have to fight now. I mean, you need real political strategies to get things done, and that's what the right has done effectively. And as you say, John, a few thousand votes here and there in certain key districts, maybe we'd be having a different conversation. But the conversation we're having because the Democrats once again are turned away at the bell, and it's a scary future. I also had one other video. I really wanted to play him the David Urban video, and then I really will let you speak, Brother Rothmann. This is
need to recognize
also. Go ahead.
That over half of America feels very strongly about the things that Donald Trump feels strongly about, right? A secure border, the economy, crime. It might not be a perfect messenger, but the message resonates. Democracy is a luxury when you can't pay your bills. And I think, there are a great deal of Americans tonight who are sitting back and saying that they view as the elite and kind of sneering and saying, we told you so. We're not garbage. We're hardworking people. We believe in these things, right? People don't like to be talked down to. This coalition, this is Hispanics. Trump is crushing in Hispanics, the Hispanic vote in Pennsylvania, right? Allentown, we were talking about how he's winning those votes because you know what those people care about? They care about security. They care about economy. They care about those things around the kitchen table.
Latinos he was talking about there. Your thoughts, John? He was just saying that. Are we losing?
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
But I do want to be clear. We are not talking now about the past. We're talking about the future. There will be actions that Donald Trump is going to take in the next few weeks, including dismissing the federal prosecutor, Mr. Smith, including what he's going to do about the border, including Ukraine aid, which you talked about a few moments ago, including the Middle East. He's going to be on the spot to produce. And one of the things, if it really was the economy stupid, is will people find security is improved? What does it mean when he talks about tariffs? We could discuss at great length 1892 and what tariffs did to this country. But I want everybody to be aware, I'm not depressed today. Elections don't depress me. They energize me. And that means that the Democratic Party and those who have opposed Donald Trump will have to find an energy. Let me also point out that the real disaster was the Liz Cheney, Dick Cheney, Adam Kinzinger approach, and the General Kellys and the General Mattises. You mentioned, as I mentioned last night with you, Donald Trump's threat to bring General Mattis back into service so he can be court-martialed. There are things that Donald Trump has said that he is going to do. We'll see if he does. If he softens what he's doing, does he alienate his base, or does he strengthen the idea that he's really president of all the people? The retribution tour that he has talked about, and I was at a dinner party several weeks ago where somebody said to me, oh, he's just rhetoric. He's not going to do it. That'll be the challenge, Mark, because if he does, then the country really will be in turmoil, and there really will be questions. One other quick point. We're a long way from the inaugural address that Donald Trump will give on January 20th. But remember his inaugural address in 2017, where he painted a dark picture of America. Will Donald Trump present a dark picture of America or a positive picture? And one other quick point. I know we're limited on time. Look at J.D. Vance very carefully. At Trump's age, you have to consider who the vice president is. You also have to consider that Trump is already a lame duck, which means that J.D. Vance is the heir apparent. So I'm looking at all of these things. I don't have answers, but I can tell you as a political junkie, all of this intrigues me because every day we are going to have more and more things to talk about. And the American people and democracy really are at stake.
The transition that will follow, Donald Trump has taken an interesting tack on this. There's reporting that suggests that he doesn't want FBI background checks on many of his appointees.
That is correct.
That be part of his administration. And to John's point, the people who populate his administration, J.D. Vance among them, of course, very high profile, they have a plan this time. We touched on it in the last half hour. And Elon Musk being a big part of it is no small...
And Robert F. Kennedy Jr., please,
Sure.
don't neglect the fact that there are individuals now, as Elon Musk or Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who are going to play significant roles. I don't know that Bobby Kennedy Jr. will be a cabinet secretary, but he is going to have an inordinate amount of power when it comes to medicine. That scares the living bejeebers out of me. And Elon Musk, and I pointed this out last night, Elon Musk is a genius, but so is Henry Ford. And the last person you would have wanted running affairs was Henry Ford, who was a vicious Jew hater. So the question of Elon Musk and his role, by the way, you know that his mother, Elon Musk's mother, just wrote a book. She is being featured on various parts of the Fox segments. Why? It softens the image of Elon Musk. So these are real concerns. I mean, Mark, there are not enough hours in the day for us to monitor all of these things.
Ask Rothmann, Randy says, how he thinks Harris got 14 million fewer popular votes than Biden did in 2020.
Because Biden was popular in 2020 and Trump was unpopular. In this campaign, Kamala Harris could not compete. And now, when you talk about finger pointing, it'll be all at Joe Biden, all the things he didn't do. So it's going to be interesting. The other thing is, Kamala Harris is coming back to California. That's my expectation. She'll be in Southern California. But I don't see her as a major player in the Democratic Party. I don't.
No, she's done. I mean, as I say, she had the accident of proximity to this man, Joe Biden, who could no longer go on. And I'll remind everybody that the Biden machine, the electoral machine, the election machine, was really only inheritable by Kamala Harris cleanly. That is to say, the money, the war chest, all of that.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, so it was a moment in time. And as I also say, I think she didn't do badly for given the challenge. She wouldn't have been my choice if we had started this thing in a traditional way. I've never felt that she has much with the voters and doesn't really have much of a connection. But having said that, all of that enthusiasm, her huge rallies and huge endorsements and Taylor Swift and all the, I mean, there was a sense that, and women, you felt like women really have buy-in. They showed up in 2022, and now they're going to show up in big numbers, and they're going to carry the day for Kamala Harris. And Latinos, how could they vote for this guy who's just throwing all of these rhetorical Molotov cocktails at the Latino community? There was just every sense that you could buy in to the fact that Kamala Harris, in this truly unorthodox way, was going to make it to the finish line. And then it all went poof.
Yeah, because Donald Trump is Donald Trump. The one thing I can tell you is when everyone asks, how did he win? He's going to say, because I did it my way. And I believe that Donald Trump's ego now is going to play a big role in whether or not he can pull this off. But we'll have to wait and see. But you're right. Your premises are completely correct. All the pundits from the left are shocked. And you know what I'm waiting for? I want to hear the Sean Hannitys and the Mark Levins and the Laura Ingrams, who are all going to exult at the fact that their power, their influence in America grew as a result of this election, and they will be right.
Well, I mean, the last time around, Sean Hannity was a de facto chief of staff for Trump. I mean, he was talking to him as frequently as a chief of staff would speak to him.
And he will again.
Yeah. And this is the fact. Donald Trump understands messaging. He understands it really well. And he understands that the Fox News channel is a giant instrument of messaging. So the Sean Hannitys and Laura Ingrams, they can do that bidding. And the last thing I'll say, just because we're on this media and media messaging, is that he's threatened to come after the NBCs, the MSNBCs, the Washington Post, et cetera, any of these media outlets that he feels have not treated him favorably.
Why
he
do you
may
think
be,
the Washington Post didn't endorse Kamala Harris?
he may be
Why
able
do
to
you
do
think
it,
the LA
John.
Times didn't endorse Kamala Harris? Because retribution is built into Donald Trump. He got it from Roy Cohen, and he continues to pursue it.
John is someone who you can listen to every day. He has a podcast called Around the Political World with John Rothmann. How are you liking doing that, sir? You still enjoying it?
I love doing it. I get up every morning enthusiastic. We have a huge listenership. But I have to tell you, Mark, what I really miss is our interaction on the radio, having the ability to reach millions of people. We have to rethink that strategy. And maybe there's no way to go backward, but to go forward, there has to be more interactive radio.
Well, there
Although
isn't
this
any way
is-
to go backward, and you need to use the platform that you now have been gifted, the podcast audience, and you need to think about that, John Rothman. That's my advice to you this day. And
Oh,
I
we're
really,
doing it.
yeah,
We're doing it. They guesstimate that I have about 150,000 listeners.
Yeah.
Maybe it's more. But look what you've done, Mark. You've hit the 50,000 mark. And I think that
those are
is-
subscribers, John. Those are not all of those people listen all the time, but they are subscribers. I
How
can
could
run
they
my
not
numbers
listen?
with you if you want to get into a thing about who has more listeners. I'd be happy
No.
to do it, John.
No,
if that's
no,
what you're
no,
really
no.
doing,
Why are you yelling?
I am so ready to go through my numbers with you.
Why are you yelling?
All right.
No, but that's the whole point, Mark. Our numbers, whatever they are less than what they should be. And I regret that. I mean, it's something.
Well, radio
anyway,
was a special medium. I miss radio because it's my home medium. But and as you say, radio gave us KGO radio an interactivity that we certainly miss with callers.
So,
and
I know
yeah.
we have to close. I just want to say we're going to watch the next few days. I can tell you in an hour, I will listen to Kamala Harris, what her concession is like. We are going to have to watch how Donald Trump constructs his new administration. Who are his key advisors? Who will the people be who are pulling the levers of power? Who will be his cabinet officers? All of those things is going to make for fascinating watching, listening, and observing. And we'll do it right here on the Mark Thompson program.
Thank you, sir. John Rothman, everybody. Hi, it's Mark, and I thought that was great. Hit the notification bell. You'll know whenever there's a new video being dropped, and please subscribe to our channel to help us save the universe.